How your mother will react when you stop letting her control you and manipulate you. I first off want to start with reading something that I saw on someone's WhatsApp status, and it says, "When people say you were such a good kid growing up, it means you expressed no needs and you did as you were told. A lot of the good kids were anxious kids, the sensitive kids who could sense the frustration of the adults in their lives whenever they expressed their needs. So, this is a reminder for parents to check on their good kids. Chances are they have learned to stay quiet about their needs. Sensitive and even tempered children will shape themselves in whoever you want them to be. This is their way of coping." This really hit hard for me because it is exactly why I was a good kid. I've spoke I have spoken a number of times about how for me being a good kid was a way for me to gain my mother's affection, to gain my mother's attention, to not stress her, to not worry her, to such a point that I ended up never sharing what worried me. I ended up never sharing how I felt, what didn't sit right with me, what was going on in my life, because somehow I felt like I would burden my mother. And I always like to speak for the other side of things, as to say, I'm not saying my mother should have been a mind reader. I'm not saying my mother should have just guessed that something was wrong with me. But what I'm saying, and what I think that post expresses, is that my mother never really created an environment where I felt free and able to speak to her. The environment was, and growing up for me, I always reasoned that, okay, things were tough at home. Like my mother was trying her best to make ends meet. She was trying to put food on the table. So things were tough. I always reasoned and justified her not giving us that space to talk to her and unloading on her and letting her know what's going on with us. I always reasoned that it was because, she's stressed about work. She's stressed about where the next meal is going to come from. Things were really tough. Sometimes she had a piss job, sometimes part-time job, sometimes no job at all. And so I always just justified her not being there for us emotionally as because it was the whole work thing, because of the financial situation, because of the circumstances. And it hit me hard when I was in varsity, realizing that, hey, things have actually progressed in my family to be better. Financially, my mother was in a better place, but still I saw that she was not emotionally available to me. And I continued even as things changed, because I think for most of my primary school years, things were really tough. And when I started high school, things started to look better. My mother got a better job. Things started to look up. And, like where the next meal was going to come from wasn't much of a stress anymore. But still, my mother didn't really show up for us emotionally. And by that time, I had already learned, because as a kid, I just learned that, okay, don't stress mommy out. She's already got a lot going on, so don't stress her out. But now I realize that it wasn't just me reasoning that, okay, don't stress my mother out. It was something that she actually did put out there psychologically that I didn't even notice, because now I realize that as the situation got better and I saw that my mother was still not there for us, I now see that this is something that she actually put forward by either shutting us down when we tried to open up to her by saying, oh, don't worry about that, or don't stress yourself out, or have faith, pray about it. My mother wouldn't fully engage when you try to talk to her about something, when you try to express how maybe frustrated or stressed or sad or angry you are about something. In that moment, it felt like, okay, my mother is being here for me and telling me to have faith and not worry about this. But now that I look back, all those things were just her way of shutting us down, because I'd like to believe she doesn't know how to be there for us emotionally. My mother doesn't have emotional capacity to be there for other people. But it's so crazy because she expects other people to be there for her in full capacity emotionally for her, which is what happened with us as a children. We were there, especially me, because I now see that I am naturally empathetic. I am naturally compassionate. I want to be there. I'm serving. I have a very serving side of me where I want to serve others. I want to be there for others. And now I'm learning to dial it back because not everybody deserves that. And that doesn't sound great, especially coming from a Christian woman, because I'm a born again Christian. But I'm letting God bless me with the wisdom to know when to be serving, because other people will really take advantage of that. Other people will use you, drag you through the dirt while you're trying to be good. And I think that's the same thing that happened with my mother. She enjoyed the fact that I was so I became a mother. I always say this. I became a mother to my own mother, because I think part of it, I'm very motherly. I'm very nurturing. I can easily put myself, second. And this is like it's a bit of both. I think naturally God gave me these qualities. But another part of it that I always put myself second is because I was conditioned by my very own mother to always put myself second and think about her. And so I just kind of grew up to think like that, even when it came to other people, that, okay, just put yourself back and always think about the other person, always think about someone else's needs. And it is a good thing to a certain extent. Like I say, not everybody deserves that. So to a certain extent, it is a good quality to have, to be able to think of others and be serving. But then at the same time, if you start to feel depleted, if you are running dry and no one is there for you, then it's no use. Because for me, it's no use to be a good person and then end up being very bitter and resentful because other people are not there for you. Like being a good person shouldn't come from a point of like, yeah, I do it because I have to, but now I'm really bitter and resentful towards those that I'm good to. You know what I mean? So it's a bit of a contradiction to say I'm always there for other people. I always support, I always give of myself, but you are very bitter and resentful and very angry, because people are not doing the same for you, and you feel neglected, you feel unseen, you feel unappreciated. And that is exactly how I actually started to feel. And I think in my high school years, even though I didn't see it, I think I started to be resentful towards my own mother, that she wasn't giving of herself as much as I was giving of myself. And I wasn't just giving of myself as a daughter would to their mother, because yes, daughters are also supposed to be supportive to their mothers. They're supposed to be there for their mothers. But for me, I was going above and beyond. I was a mother to my own mother. And so now I realize that I was just a good kid for the sake of like not frustrating my mother, because it was all about just making sure my mother is fine. I don't want to worry her. I don't want to worry her with like what's going on in my life, whether things are happening at school, whether things are happening personally, whether like I'm being bullied or whatnot. I didn't want to worry my mother. But even at the chance where I tried to be like, okay, let me tell my mother what's happening, I felt like I was shut down by her saying, just have faith or don't stress too much about this. Like it's so, oh, it's so useless when you talk to someone and you say, I'm stressed about this, da 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 da, and they tell you to not stress about it. Like, what are you saying? Like, I'm trying to express something I'm stressed about. I'm trying to express something I'm upset about, and you tell me, oh, don't be upset about that. It feels like someone is not really giving any effort into just like engaging with you in the conversation. And it's not even entirely their responsibility to make you feel better, but if it's your mother, if it's someone you love, someone you are close to, it is their responsibility to just simply be there for you. You might not know the right thing to say to make me feel better. You might not have a solution to change the situation, But it is my responsibility as a child, as a daughter, as a friend, as maybe one day a wife to someone. It is fully my responsibility to just be there for you. You know, I might not always have the right thing to say. And I never expected that from my mother to always say this wonderful thing that's always going to make me feel better. It is unrealistic to expect that from any human being. But I expected her to just be there, to just listen. I needed to know that, like I can vent, I can go on a full blown rant, I can complain, I can take out my frustrations and share them with her without feeling like I'm being shut down, without feeling like I'm just being told to not feel like, because essentially what I felt when I was talking with my mother was feeling like whenever I talk to her and tell her how I'm feeling, essentially what I felt like she was saying is just don't feel that way. Because I guess she just didn't know what else to say. Because I guess she was so used to us being there for her that she didn't know how to be there for us. It is the weirdest and strangest thing, but somehow it makes sense. It makes sense that I was a good kid just because I would keep quiet about my needs. I would keep quiet about my feelings just in order to make my mother happy. And this also just started leaking in other areas of my life, in other relationships of my life, where I always thought like, okay, I should just keep quiet about my needs and take care of the other person. Excuse me. And so now that I'm at this point where I realize that, you know what, my mother has not been there for me emotionally, but not only has she not been there for me emotionally, she has been emotionally abusive, she has been controlling, and she has been manipulative. She's been a narcissist for all my life, and I didn't even realize it. Now that I realize all these things, and now that I have the courage, and and I think also the courage just came from me being fed up. When you get so tired of something, so tired of a situation, so tired of a person that you just no longer can take it. I think the courage, that's where it came from, the courage to just kind of stop this behavior and not tolerate it anymore. It's because I got so tired. I got so fed up of being treated the way that I was treated by my own mother and my own sister. I got so tired. I got so exhausted. I got so drained of like trying to give of myself. Because here's another thing with a narcissistic mother, with an emotional abusive, like an emotionally needy. I don't even know if that's the right way to put it, because I understand emotional needs. Emotional needs are valid. Emotional needs are what we all have at the end of the day. But my mother she keeps on drawing and drawing. She needs way more validation than a person should need. She needs way more emotional attention than a person should need. And I've always been her supply. Because I don't know why. Even as a child, I always wanted to make my mother happy. And not the kind of happy where you're thinking as a child, you're just like going to show your mother your good grades, or you're going to do something and you want to make your mother happy in that sense. I just always just wanted to make her happy in the sense that she's okay, she's smiling, she's fine. That I don't know if that is something she planted in me from a young age to make it all about her, but I just always wanted to make her happy. Like my mother would be upset or angry about her own things that had nothing to do with me, or maybe just she came back home from work upset or whatnot, and somehow I would take it upon myself to make her happy. Like I would like maybe cook or clean, just make sure that she has no other thing to be worried about, or just make sure like, okay, I see that she's not fine, so I'm gonna do this and that. I always took it upon myself. And I think a part of it was probably planted by her, because my mother does play the victim card so well. Like my mother will make a situation that maybe would have frustrated anybody, and she will act like she's a victim of it. And I think as a child, I probably, would see her because, she was working hard. She had sometimes unbearable jobs. And I think she would come back and like tell us the stories, tell us how hard it is. And this is how, like, part of the emotional, what can I call it? The emotional control that she has over her children is like always making things like they're way too hard for her, you know? But at the same time, because my mother is, she is contradiction walking. Like, if contradiction was a person, it would be my mother. Because at the same time, she likes to act like she's so strong and nothing can get her down. But then at the same time, she will like face something and then act like she's like the first person to face that, and like maybe life is so unfair to her, and maybe like, these things only happen to her. She will play victim to like things that happen to everybody. Like having a bad day at work, or maybe someone not treat you right, it's not fine, it's not okay. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, a lot of people have faced that. So you're not like necessarily like the only person who's facing that. It doesn't make it okay. And trust me, I'm not trying to invalidate her experiences. I'm not trying to invalidate whatever might have been happening in her life, or whatever upsetting, frustrating situation she was going through. But what I'm trying to say is how she exaggerated the situation because she needed us to feel sorry for her. And not only us, just that we obviously lived with her, so we got to see more of the side. But typically, my mother wants people to feel for her, and then she becomes somehow the center of attention. And then the contradiction comes when she's like, "Oh, but I'm so strong." Like just the other day, she was sharing a scripture with us. And because I'm currently unemployed, she was sharing how, like, she's obviously been in my situation where she wasn't employed, but she never really worried or stressed about it. She never really lost faith. But she's lying. She likes to portray this "I am so strong" character. But when she faces something, she likes to break down as if like, "Oh, life is always so hard and so unfair on me." She is a walking contradiction. And so now that I'm not letting all these things that she used to do, control us, manipulate us, now that I'm not letting it affect me, or I'm stopping her from doing all these things, I have seen the reactions. They've like progressed as like I continue to like no longer tolerate this behavior, no longer put up with all these things, with the emotional circus. Like that's what I feel like between my family it has been an emotional chaos, an emotional circus, where sometimes you're confused, sometimes you think you understand my mother and you feel for her and you're on her side, and the next thing you know, you're like, okay, wait, but I now feel confused about my own emotions. I am now neglecting my own emotions. It has been an emotional circus. Okay, it has been an emotional circus, and nothing has changed till this far, and the only thing that's changing now is me, because I gotta stop tolerating this behavior. Otherwise, she will always keep controlling me and manipulating me, emotionally abusing me, and just continue doing all this toxic behavior towards me. So, the first thing that I saw, because I started this year, I think in April, where I was uncovering and learning about a narcissistic mother, learning about narcissistic personality disorder, learning about emotional abuse. Because sometimes you think you know these things until you really start like learning. And then you realize that, oh my word, that was actually emotional abuse. That was psychological abuse. My mother is actually a narcissist. Because, like most people, I think I also just thought that a narcissistic person was just someone who's arrogant, someone who loved themselves too much. But trust you me, it is way deeper than that. Just search for narcissistic mother signs. You will be amazed at how unbearable the situation you've been in has been, and you didn't even fully notice. For me, I actually thank God that maybe I wasn't fully aware, because I was still young and there wasn't much I could do about it. So I think part of me not really being fully aware, even though I knew sometimes I would be hurt, I felt like my mother was shutting me down. I had all these emotions bottled up and I couldn't really talk about them to anyone. But I think it was just part of God's protection for me to not fully see it. Because had I fully seen it at that age where I was young, a kid or a teenager, I just think it would have been more unbearable for me as a child to be trying to stand up to my mother at that age. Because now I am in my late 20s, I'm a young adult. I think I am a bit more mature to kind of handle this situation because I'm still living at home. I've been back home for a couple of years, and now I think I'm a bit mature to just not be reactive, because I think if I had realized at that time that my mother was actually emotionally abusive and emotionally unavailable to me, I think I would have been very reactive. I would have been rebellious. I think I would have reacted in a very immature way that would have made the situation worse. Because here's the thing about a narcissistic mother, they always waiting for you to do something wrong so that they can flip the script on you and say, oh, but you are the one who's rebellious. You are the one who talks back at me. They always want to have things to list for you that you have done wrong so that, we can sort of like overlook what they've been doing wrong. So now I think I'm in a position where I'm handling this situation better so that she doesn't have a list of things, because this is what always my mother does. Whenever you confront her about something, she will pull out a list of things that you have also done wrong. And this is just her way. And this is not to excuse. If I have ever done something wrong to my mother, it is not to excuse my behavior. But here's my problem. If my mother has a list of things that she like doesn't like about me, she should have brought it up in her own time. Why is it then that when I bring up something that doesn't sit well, or I try to talk to you about something, I try to address something, all of a sudden you pull out a list of like, oh, but you are also moody, because I grew up being very moody. So that was always used against me, like, oh, but you are moody, or you do this. My problem is, why not bring that issue up in your own time? Why not sit me down and talk to me about that? And had my mother actually sat me down and asked me, like, why are you sometimes moody? Had I felt like I was given a platform where she wanted to listen, where she was sincere and genuine and wanted to know, I would have actually told her that I actually have all these feelings. I probably would have had more of an insight, even myself, as to why am I actually like this. I would have maybe told her that I feel unheard. I feel like I need to always be there for other people and no one is there for me. But she only uses this as a way to just, she would use it because I used to be moody, now I'm not. She would use this as a way to just like deflect so that we don't focus on her. And since it's always been the case, even now, my mother will still do the same thing. Whenever I tell her, maybe I want to say that, oh, mom, I didn't like it when you said this to me, then she will bring up, like, you are also not perfect. I hate that argument. Like, whenever you confront my mother about something and you tell her something she did or said that she didn't like, she will always bring up this argument that I'm not perfect, just like you are not perfect. Like, mom, no one is asking you to be perfect. I'm just asking you to be mindful of things you say. I'm just addressing this one particular issue, and now you're making it about perfection. She will always say, like, I'm not perfect. Why do you guys expect me to be perfect? I'm not asking for perfection. I'm asking you to stop doing this thing that I'm addressing right now. And this is just the chaos, the circus that I'm talking about when it comes to my mother. It is an emotional circus. It is an emotional chaos. So now that I'm no longer tolerating that, I'm no longer tolerating and excusing and justifying this behavior, I'm stopping her from emotionally controlling me, from manipulating me, from abusing me. The first thing that I saw, the reaction was shock and anger. And at that time, I was also very angry. I was angry because nothing will make you angry like seeing how much you will feel like you've been a fool for not seeing it. It's almost like when you're in a relationship and everybody keeps telling you, oh, this guy is bad for you, oh, this guy does this and that, and you don't see it, like you're in love with this guy, or you excuse the behavior. And then when things end, you usually feel like you were such a fool for not seeing it. You know what I mean? You feel like, I was so dumb for not seeing it. And you are angry at yourself. And it's just the normal way of processing something that has happened to you. And when I discovered all of this and I learned about what narcissism really means, what emotional abuse really is, all these terms like gaslighting, manipulation, like all these things, I got so angry. I felt so angry that firstly, I didn't see it for the longest time. Even though I knew sometimes I would be hurt, sometimes I would feel down, sometimes I felt like I wasn't heard, but I didn't think it was emotional abuse. I didn't think my mother and my sister were narcissists. So I was very angry. And another thing that I was angry about was the fact that they still hadn't changed. I'm in my late 20s. My sister is in her early 20s. My mother is old. The fact that this thing still hasn't changed, it made me so angry. I was so angry that till this point, we're still nowhere close to communicating effectively, to communicating in a healthy way, to being there for each other. I am the one who's always been trying to be there for them, hoping that someday they will be there for me. And I was really angry. And at that time, because I was just like, I felt like I just wanted to get out of here. I didn't want to be home. I saw that my mother was shocked, like at the transition that was happening. And she was also angry because I couldn't even stand to be in the same room with her. I would try to avoid being around her because I was also going through these emotions. I was trying to deal with like realizing that I've been emotionally abused, realizing that how unhealthy and toxic our family dynamic has been. So I was just trying to avoid her, not really speaking to her. I tried my best to not be moody because I knew that would be used against me. But I was just in a process of digesting and processing these feelings. I was very angry. And she was shocked. She was also angry, like seeing the change that was happening in me. And she also started like throwing the threats, because this is one of her of her tactics that she has always used. Like, one of the things that emotional abusers will use is that you fear them. I've never feared my mother in the sense that she will like physically abuse me or anything, or maybe even like take away my food. It has never been that bad, but at the same time, it has been bad. You know, like my mother wouldn't be like, okay, I'm gonna lock you in your room, or I'm gonna not give you food. But more of my mother's abuse was mainly emotional. Like, she would give you maybe the silent treatment, or maybe she like wouldn't give you the affection or would pay more attention to the other one instead of you. It was emotional tactics. Okay, that's how she would punish you. And so she started like even with the look. So she moved from being shocked and angry that I was now seeming different, and then she started like giving like, your mother's look, that look that says don't you dare, but my mother's look is more of like a threat and a way to keep you submissive, to like keep you under her control, under her reign. And so she would start like, I remember this one time she came back from work and I was still in my room, and I stayed in my room until like I think like 7, and then I went out to like watch the TV show that we normally watch together. And then she gave me this look, that look that said like, where have you been? Why haven't you been here with us? This is another such a confusing thing. Like, they need you to be around. And it was so surprising for me when I watched a video that talked about how emotional abuse, narcissistic abuse sometimes happens. And one of the signs that they talked about is that sometimes you feel like you always have to be with your family. Like, they always want you around, so much so that sometimes you feel like you're suffocating. And I didn't know this. And I have felt this for the longest time. And I've always tried to communicate with my family that I'm reserved. Sometimes I need to be by myself. This is how just like I like to spend my time. But it was more than me just being an introvert and needing to be by myself sometimes to recharge. But it was actually the fact that it's almost like they always need you around. I don't know if it's because they need you for the emotional supply, or maybe they can't stand being by themselves. Like my mother would be sitting with my sister, but somehow just because maybe I haven't been out of my room for a couple of hours, she would look like she's mad at me for not being with them. Like I once mentioned this that one time I spent like most of the time, like on weekends, most of the time we are together, I would spend like an entire day. And maybe like around 4 or 5, I come to my room just like to chill by myself. And my mother would look angry, like, woman, since the morning, it was a Saturday, since the morning, I've been with you, watching TV with you, talking with you. Now that I'm just taking an hour to myself, it feels like I'm committing a crime. That's the emotional abuse. That's the suffocation where you feel like you are always forced to be with them. And when they don't want to be with you, because if my mother's in her mood and she just wants to go to her room, nobody gets to say anything. I don't get to say, hey, mom, why are you leaving? Come and be with us. I don't get to say anything, because she's her and she can do whatever. It's even the double standards that my mother has that annoys me so much. She has such double standards. When she's in her mood, when she's in her own space, we give her a space and she goes to her room, stays there for a couple of hours because sometimes you need time by yourself, and it's not because you're angry at anyone or maybe you're upset about something. Maybe you just need time by yourself. You need to think, you need time by yourself. It's a normal thing. It's just a normal thing. But somehow my family makes me feel like I'm not normal for wanting time to myself. Like I'm asking, I will spend an entire day with you, an entire weekend with you, but dare I go to my room for an hour? Then she would just like start giving me this look as if like, why? Why don't you want to be with us? All of a sudden it seems like I don't love my family. Like, you never want to spend time with us. But I've been with you. Like I've been with you. Like, what are you saying? Yeah, so that was like the next reaction with like the verbal threat or the look. And then when I finally kind of confessed, and I say kinda because I didn't fully tell them everything, it's no point. Like, it is no point sitting down with these people and saying, so, guys, I've realized that you are narcissists. You've emotionally abused me. You've manipulated. It is no point. They will flip it. They will freak out because they never want to be confronted about how they are. They never want to face how they are. So it's completely useless. So I was not going to have that conversation. So even as myself, as I progress from like being angry at the realization that I've been emotionally abused and progressing to becoming more calmer and just realizing that, you know what, being angry is not going to help me. It's an emotion I needed to feel. Trust me, I'm not regretting being angry about that, because one of the things that my mother always did was invalidate how I felt and made me feel like you shouldn't feel like that. And so at the time when I was angry, I actually allowed myself. I gave myself permission, the permission that I feel like I've always been denied to feel. I gave myself permission. You know what? I'm angry right now. I'm angry that my family's still this way. I'm angry that they've actually toyed with my feelings all this time. I'm angry that I've given of myself and they've never given of themselves. I'm angry that I feel like I've never been seen, never heard, never truly valued by my own mother, by my own family. And I allowed myself to feel that. And I progressed, and I thank God, like in the midst of it all, I would say short prayers. I kept saying, Lord, please help me not to be like them. Because I didn't want to give them the silent treatment. I didn't want to like be walking around pouting and angry. Like I just didn't want to give them something to use against me. And I didn't want to treat them the way they would treat me. And so I would have like short prayers in the midst of like me being angry and digesting this, like, Lord, help me to rise above this situation and not be like them and not treat them the way they've treated me. And so when I finally did like along the line tell them that, you know what, this is what has been happening with me. I've realized that you guys have affected my self-esteem. I kept it short, I kept it brief. I didn't get into all the details because, like I said, it is no point, because they can never understand when they've done something wrong. I kept it brief. I told them that I feel like I know that you guys have affected my self-esteem. And then my mother started crying. Like, this is like, she played the victim so hard. And that day, it's like I saw her for the first time for who she really is. Because while she was crying. And in the past, this is something that I would have felt bad for. Like I would have been like, oh my word, I've just upset my mother and I don't want her to feel like this. But I just looked at her crying, playing the victim and saying like, why do you think I'd want to hurt you? And this is another thing that emotional abusers will say, like, why do you think I want to hurt you? I would never want to hurt you. I love you. I'm your mother. But yes, mom, you've hurt me. You have. I don't care what you think. I don't care anymore. I didn't say this because I didn't want to get into this whole thing. But in my mind, I was thinking, I don't care what you believe. Like, believe the lie that you want to believe. Believe that you would never hurt me, but you have. Believe that you love me so much that you'd never want to hurt me, but you have hurt me. And you haven't even loved me enough.